Well, hello everyone. I am so excited to be hosting this week's Leadership and Retention Lab. My name is Julie Teal. If we haven't met, my company is Teal Talent Strategy. And the type of work I do is partnering with founders and CEOs of small to medium sized professional services firms. My specialty areas are IT, accounting and engineering, those three areas, although I can work in a lot of different industries. What I do is I partner with those leaders to put the right HR practices in place to reduce turnover, create workforce stability, because I really believe if you have a stable workforce, you've put the foundation in place for growth. You can grow on that. And I know all the founders and leaders I work with are, want to make money and serve their stakeholders and serve their customers. And you can do that better at scale when you've got the right talent in place. So that's what I do. And I'm really excited to be bringing this episode of the discussion we're having about retention forward. So just a little bit about how I approach turnover. So when I started to put this business together, I really thought about what makes it work, like what really makes a difference when it comes to retention. And what I put together is a combination of research and of what I found, in practice actually makes a difference. And so this model, I always put this up when I talk, so I have to kind of lean over a little bit, but the model is the growth model. And each one of those letters it represents a different aspect that companies need to focus on in order to really put positive retention practices forward. So, and really put it all together. And what I've learned over the years is that there's never one thing that makes the difference. It's multiple things. I think building culture and the right environment for corporate success depends on having multiple factors in place. So you put one in, you put another in, and that combination of factors is really what makes a difference in getting people to love their work, love their company, and decide to stay and grow their career. So what we're talking about today, so over the last three sessions together, we've talked about great beginnings, we've talked about relationships, and we've talked about organizational clarity. So we've covered those three. And this week, we're talking about work that works, which is the W in the model. So let me pull this down. Again, I'm learning all about my my streaming capabilities there. So that's gone. So what that means basically is we're going to be talking about the aspects from the employee standpoint that really make work for them. And so that is pay, that is benefits, that's flexibility, that's workload. So all of those factors that typically are most personally meaningful to an employee as an individual. And frankly, different formulas work for different people. So I think that's part of what sometimes is difficult for organizations to understand and implement is how do you put all those factors in place in a way that's really going to work for many employees, even though they have very different needs and very different points of view. So we're going to talk about a few factors of those today. So the three things that we're going to talk about, and I'm just looking over here at my list, we're going to talk about pay that keeps up, so an aspect of compensation. We're going to talk about benefits that grow with your employee's life, which is also really important because different life stages require different support and different needs. And then finally, workload that it respects life outside of work. So we're going to talk about that as well, because again, I think, there's a lot of factors that are important to individuals, and one of them isn't related to pay at all. It's certainly is the work, and is your company serving a higher purpose? That's the H in the model that we'll be getting to in a couple weeks. But this part you can't ignore, and it's not like pay people well and you're done. And you still need to pay people in a way that's competitive with market. Otherwise, they will look for other opportunities. So anyway, so let's jump in. Let's jump into the first one, which is pay that keeps up. And I wanted to talk about one specific aspect of this because, again, the pay rates that you pay your employees really do depend on your business model, affordability, the type of people that you hire, there's a lot of factors that go into pay. I tend to be an advocate when you're talking about designing pay systems of doing the research to figure out what kind of that midpoint of the market actually is within your local community, and then trying to match that or be as close to that as you can, because otherwise, if you're below market and are making those decisions without the right information, you can run into turnover and make it, because you don't want people to be lured away by another paycheck. You want them to really pause and think before leaving your company, based on the investment you've made to get them up to speed, and their contribution and client relationships and all the different factors that make keeping people really important. But the aspect of this I wanted to talk about today has to do with regular annual increases. And I've really come to realize, I think I took for granted when I worked in really large corporations, which I did earlier in my career, that everybody got a increase every year, that was just a standard process that happened within organizations. And what I've learned from working with organizations in all industries and all sizes is that that is not the case. That there are many organizations, for a variety of reasons, that decide or don't have a regular practice of reviewing pay and making adjustments every year. And the reason that I think making some level of adjustment every year is important is because of cost of living and cost of labor. As we're seeing right now with the economy, people's personal expenses go up every year. They typically don't go down. And so I'm not saying that you have to, again, you have to look at the market, understand the market. But what I've seen is, I'll give one example. I worked with an organization that had a large field population, and that field population, the majority of employees were on a commission system. So based on what they were selling into the organization, the clients that they were working with, they did get an extra paycheck. And there were many years, in fact, 7 years of really good commissions. So where the commissions were significant. And so the organization, for a variety of reasons, decided not to give even cost of living increases for about a 7-year period. And that did work for a period of time. However, when I was working in a leadership role at that organization, suddenly that was not working. And what was happening is the base pay, commissions were flattening out, and base pay, the base part of each one of these roles, had gotten very much behind. And so we were in a very tough position where specific locations were getting kind of wiped out by competitors. Competitors would come in, they'd present their base pay and their commission model, and it really did add up to be a better deal for those employees when they compared what we were offering and what our competitors were offering. So we had locations that were having really significant turnover problems, which was incredibly disruptive, not only for leaders, but the business, but for our customers as well. So great concern. And as we were doing kind of went behind the scenes and did a analysis on pay, one of the things that I was struck by is if we had even done a 1 or 2% increase to base over those 7 years. So not even cost of living. Cost of living those years had been 3 or 4%. If we had even just done 1%, 1.5% over that period of time, which was a nominal investment for the company, we would have been fine. We would have never been in that position. So it put us, again, the way we solved that problem was kind of surgical increases. So, we found the places and locations where we were the most behind. We did kind of surgical targeted increases because, again, the affordability of catching everyone up at once just wasn't realistic. And again, so we had to be creative in how we went in and made those increases and the ways we made them and where we made them. So, and then really put plans in place over the next few years to get people caught up. But it did put workforce stability at risk at the time. And so I have become a huge advocate for even some minimum level of increase. Now, I also, as I'm talking about this, will say to you, I know a lot of organizations that spread out the expense of pay increases by having it be on an anniversary date. So if you were hired in January, you get your increase in January. If you were hired in March, you get your increase in March. And I understand the reason behind that. And certainly, I think when an organization is maybe smaller and newer, that is something that's manageable. But what I found as an organization starts to scale, and these are the things that, as I work with companies that are growing, I often recommend having a common increase date. And so you have a transition year where you get everybody on the same date. Because what you can do then, if you're again committed to do some level of review every year, first of all, you don't miss anyone because it's notorious when managers get busy on a anniversary date model, you're going to miss someone. And that happens a lot. And unfortunately, without, and it takes a lot of, I mean, administratively, you're putting a lot of effort every month into managing increases. So there's a bigger cost to the company from both time and financial standpoint. But I do believe that if you can get everyone on a common increase date, not only does that give you a chance to make sure everyone gets a little bit of something, again, assuming they're all performing, right? I mean, I understand performance matters. It really does matter. But that also puts you in a position that if somebody is really performing well, you can recognize them and make sure that they're getting the extra that they really deserve in that model. So anyway, I really have found that regular increases and being on a common increase date can make an incredible difference in predictability for people. And if people know, hey, I'm going to get reviewed every March, um many times that helps with retention because they're like, okay, I'm going to see how this goes in March and then see where I stand. And oftentimes, again, with pay, people always will take and want more, but if you're keeping up generally with the market, you're not putting yourself at significant risk in that case. So so that's what my feeling and views on pay. And as I'm wondering, I guess for those of you that are tuned in and watching, I guess, do you have any strong feelings about anniversary date versus annual reviews? Because common date reviews. I'd be interested in thoughts on that, what you've seen worked, or if you have a certain preference on how you like to see organizations run in those aspects. But I think continuity and regularity is key when you're trying to create a culture of retention. So, so those are some of my views on it. And again, I'd love to hear your view. I've got my chat pulled up here. So if you put anything in chat, I'll be in a position to see it and respond. So the other thing while you're thinking about that I'll just mention is that, a lot of the organizations and professional services that I work with do have really kind of deep expertise, individuals that have a lot of experience and are oftentimes at the top of the pay range, where it actually maybe doesn't make sense to continue giving a minimum increase to the person's base. And I just want to acknowledge and recognize that that is really common in professional services, based on the level of deep technical expertise some of your people will have. And in those cases, I do think instead of adding to their base, you can give people a spot bonus or some sort of annual just dollar amount each year in lieu of adding to their base, because I appreciate adding to base may not be the best thing for your organization, especially when you're talking about if you have some sort of multiple of your base rate for your billing rates. So you have to be careful about that as well. So anyway, I just want to throw that in there as you're thinking about pay increases and how that works within professional services firms like yours. So the next thing I want to move on to is talking about benefits that grow with your life. So one of the techniques, and actually something that I really think that most professional services firms need to consider, is for their health benefits, which is really often the big benefit that most people are interested in and have questions about when they're looking to come work with you or for you, is they will offer some sort of heavily funded or even 100% employer paid individual health insurance. So for employee only rates, those are oftentimes under $100 a month. and in some cases 100% paid for by the company. And that has become a model, I think, especially for growing firms and small to mid-sized firms, is a way they're able to compete and bring new talent into the organization and keep talent. So I'm a huge advocate for that. You really have to make sure your employee only rates are very, very competitive. Where I have seen firms struggle or potentially, kind of miss the boat and set themselves up for future turnover is on the all the other tiers of health insurance. So whether it's employee plus spouse, employee plus child or children or family rates, you really have to make sure and look at your benefits. Or one of the things I often do is look at benefits through the lens of an employee through each life cycle. So, again, these are generalities. I know that the way families are created and develop over time is very different for individuals, but generally speaking, early in your career, you're going to be an employee only. At some point, oftentimes you spouse, kids, family. Those over this course of your life, happen, and then again, in many cases, drop off. My daughter's just in college, so she is still on insurance, but won't be for the long run. So the oftentimes growing firms will invest heavily in employee only, but maybe don't have very minimal contributions towards those other tiers of insurance. And I am just seeing you will set yourself up to lose those junior employees that are employee only now as they gain their experience and they again their life changes and they start to have families, spouses and families. Um, you will lose them if those benefits are not affordable. So I understand you're not going to have that be 100% employer paid, nor do I think you should. That's not the way I would set up a benefits plan. But taking a look at those tiers and investing either I'd say at a minimum 50% of the premium, if not 60 or 70%. 70%, once you're getting to 70%, that is pretty competitive from a cost share where you're paying 70%, the employee's paying 30% of the premium. That's pretty typical. But given the way that premiums are rocketing in cost right now, again, I'm hearing right now that employee renewals for insurance are increasing by 20% or more, depending on the organization. That is expensive. You really need to take a look, or I encourage you to take a look at the affordability side of each level of your benefits and really take that in consideration. Now, I also appreciate that can be expensive. That can absolutely be expensive. But here's what I'll also say, it is expensive to lose your team. And as you start to look, I mean, I'm a huge advocate for calculating the cost of turnover. And at a rough level, it can take you 100% of an employee's pay up to 150, up to 200% of their pay to replace them. So as you start to balance that out and take a look at the cost of replacing people versus the cost of proactively deciding to invest more in insurance costs and premium costs, I think there's an argument to be made that it is more cost effective to make that investment than it is to lose people and have, I mean, if it saves you another 2 to 5% of your people, that can make a meaningful difference in your bottom line and in your revenue growth and even client continuity. So those are things just to think about as you consider the big picture on insurance and benefits as your employees go through different life stages. So there's a lot more we could talk about there, but I just wanted to make sure that we covered that topic because especially we're on renewal time now. I know a lot of companies are making big decisions right now about their insurance premiums, how much they're going to pay, what their entire offerings are. And I would just encourage you to pause and take a look at those tiers. And if you need help with that, that is something that I'm able to help with and happy to set up a call with me and I'm happy to discuss. The final thing that I wanted to discuss today is workload. So workload and having a workload for individuals that's, again, the combination, you want it to be challenging but not overwhelming. And the phenomena I wanted to talk about is high performers. And I, I think professional services, if you're in a company that is serving clients and doing consulting work of any kind, you tend to attract people that are high performers because they love the challenge. They love the engagement with the client. They love the challenge of the problems that come their way. They love the variety that you get by in a consulting type of role. Um, and so as a result, they oftentimes are the ones to raise their hand. Your high performers, especially, will raise their hand for the tough client, will raise their hand for the big project that's got the tight deadline. All of those things. And we all know those are the places that leaders are made, right? It's the deep dive into helping a client solve a problem and coordinating a team or working through teams to get work done. That is how you develop your future leaders, your future partners, your future shareholders for your company. So it is great. It is the best training ground that exists. And that's, again, I have such a passion for professional services because I love seeing how people's careers are developed through the experiences they have serving clients. So again, 100% love that. At the same time, your high performers, it's what I call the high performer punishment paradox, is that this it can also be viewed that you're almost punishing your top performers by giving them this huge workload. They're getting punished for their good behavior and their incredible performance because in many cases they don't have a break. And so I so this is where having a, we talked about relationships before, but having good deep relationships with your team is meaningful, because one of the other ways that I think unintentionally leaders drive high performers out of their organization is through overwhelming them with workload and frankly burning them out. And I know burnout is a little bit of a buzzword these days, but it is a real thing. And I know that for many people, people are not performers on a straight line. It's like, I mean, I can, that's how I operate. I can ramp up to do a lot of work, but then I do need to ramp down and kind of rest a little before I ramp up again. And I enjoy challenges. I want to be in the thick of it. At the same time, I do need downtime to rest, which is why I went on vacation last week, which was amazing, because I'm now ready to ramp up again. And so I just think really taking a look on, is there some way to take a tough client and rotate someone else through a project, or have someone be a strong number two to that high performer so that they get a little bit of break and get experience delegating? Is there some way you can make sure that your team gets the vacation time they need? We're in the final stretch of the year, and I know so many professional services leaders and performers, now and in the past, that don't use their vacation, that end up with not using their vacation. And they may be okay with that now, but what you don't want to have happen is not to have a conversation about it and have it lead to resentment in the future, which oftentimes is one of the triggers to have someone consider another opportunity. I have recruited people this way. I have called them on a day that they were overwhelmed and frustrated and upset about the unfairness of the workload that they were experiencing. And that makes them ripe for a conversation to move to a different firm. And you don't want that to happen if you can avoid it. So I also consider this discussion about workload to be a good risk management plan, because when you load so much on one person, from a risk management standpoint, that sets you up for risk in the future. I mean, people get sick. I've seen, unfortunately, young people have tragic circumstances and pass away. I've seen people that everyone thought was going to be the next successor for the organization. I've watched them suddenly leave, and people are shocked. And what do you do with the work that's left? So you also have to think, not only, I know you love your top performers, but again, I appreciate that, but you have to have a backup plan for people as well, and not set them up to be just working so hard that you are shocked when something happens and they leave. So workload that respects their life outside of work and even their changes. I think before I had a baby, again, many years ago now, because my daughter's in college, but I needed I needed to take it down a little bit of a notch in order to get everything at home and everything at work working together before I ramped back up. Very important. And I want to do a shout out to Sarah. Hello, Sarah. Great to have you on the LinkedIn Live today. What Sarah commented is burnout is so real. Investing in the well being of employees is critical for long term success. I 100% agree. And I just think sometimes you have to take a look at, are we really spreading the workload? Are we over relying on a handful of people? And again, sometimes it's been fun to give someone else an opportunity with a client and watch them rise to that occasion. So giving people opportunities with the scaffolding to support them. Oftentimes you can find other top performers by giving them those challenges as well. So thank you for that comment, Sarah. And again, these are all areas of how do you make work really work for your team and have it work in a way that's still affordable for your organization. So that balance of the short term and the long term benefits of setting up your company, pay, benefits, workload, and flexibility. All of those, that formula is unique for each person, but it's got to work not only for the company, but it's got to work for the individual as well. If you're really serious about workforce stability and having that be the foundation of your future growth. So we've covered a lot of topics today. Just to recap, when we talk about pay that keeps up, what that means is taking a look at, are you doing annual reviews of people's pay? And what I found is even a very small 1 or 2% cost of living can make a huge difference over time so that you don't get behind with your pay. And I've seen that happen at multiple companies. So I feel very, very strongly about that. And a way to manage that oftentimes is to transition from a anniversary date model to a annual review model where everyone gets reviewed so no one gets missed, and you can hand out pay in a way that still recognizes your top performers as well. So that's what we talked about on pay that keeps up. The second thing we talked about is benefits that grow with your life, and really taking a look beyond the employee only tier, which again, oftentimes I know companies make really nice investments in how much health insurance costs for their employees only selections. But when you taking a look at what is that balance of pay, and is it still affordable for people with spouses, kids, and entire families to be on your plan? Because if you don't think about that, you're at risk of losing many of your experienced people. So there's that piece of it. And then finally, what we just talked about is taking a look at workload. Workload is critical, and oftentimes your top people are the ones that are, again, on one hand, being rewarded with the opportunities, but you have to be careful that doesn't slip over time into being punished with overwhelm and overwork. So those were the topics we talked about today. So thank you for joining me. Just a quick note, I'm going to put this up really quick. I'm excited to announce that my new website is now live. So my website is tealtalentstrategy.com, and Teal is spelled Thiel. So check it out. It's got some great information there about the services I provide, and also some resources. I'm going to have some regular blog posts there that you can keep up with. Also, I'll mention, if you're enjoying this content and want to hear more, not only do I have a YouTube channel, but I also post some pieces of these videos and other content on LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn profile. And then finally, I'll mention that I'm going to be starting a newsletter. So if you enjoy this content, please be sure to sign up. I have a newsletter, sign up for my newsletter link on my website, which is listed down here. So I'd love to have you be on that list and be part of my growing community. So thank you so much. It's great to talk to you this week, and we'll